welcome. What's brought us all together here today is Scott's book, Natural Rest for Addiction. Scott, I thought it might be good for you just to tell us a bit about how the book came about, and many people might have had the original version. Could you give us a few pointers about what's different about this version?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona.
Thanks.
Yeah, so the first version was written before the Kilby Center opened. And so it was based on mainly my own path and things that were helpful to me. But then as the Kilby Center opened, we started to work with, in a sense, a new audience, if you want to call it an audience, people who were not necessarily interested in inquiry or non-dual awareness or anything like that, or embodiment. And those terms were kind of just not familiar with those folks. And so we had to do a couple of things. We had to make the work as accessible as possible for those people. So I hope that the second version of the book is more accessible. And the second thing is we really got a big taste of how trauma and shame and some of the underlying issues are such a big part of recovery, and then working with those issues, developing different ways to help people with those issues, especially on the bodily level. So I wanted to put all those insights and tools into the second version. And by the way, since we're talking about that, Donna Spencer is here, and I think that she might be under the name Julianne. Yeah, she's here. So Donna, yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to have her on the screen because she's a facilitator at the center, and she can help talk about some of that as it pops up. So I just wanted to talk to she's under Donna Spencer right now, and she's waving. So.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here this morning.
Thanks, Scott. What kind of feedback have you been getting about the book? Have you had some feedback about how people have been finding it?
Yeah, I mean, people generally like it. They find it helpful, especially just the part about resting and allowing everything to be, because I think that's new for some people. I think that there's a repression that happens around certain negative states or cravings. So that I think one of our tendencies is when something like that comes up, we kind of want to push it down or resist it. And so kind of being given the permission to just allow it is a new way for people. So that's been definitely helpful, certainly helpful for me. And then, there's been some struggles with it too, because with drug and alcohol addiction especially, it's sometimes difficult, if not impossible, for some people to kind of use the book by itself to quit. And it can be dangerous, actually, to use the book to try to quit the drugs and alcohol when detox is needed. So I've seen both sides of it. I've seen people who are able to take the book and then see kind of a slowly winding down of their addiction rather than abrupt. Some people just abruptly quit, and then others will more like slowly wind down over time. And then also the struggles with, I get the emails that say, hey, I've been drinking for every day for 3 or 4 years, and I've got your natural rest book. And one of the things I want to say is be very careful, because especially with alcohol, you might need to detox first or be under the care of a physician. So those are the kinds of emails I get. But really wanting to spread, just got released again in May of this year, so it's brand new, the second edition. So I think there's a lot of people who haven't read it yet, and this is great to have this roundtable to spread the word about it, and to spread the word about the facilitators who are here, because there's a lot of work that can be done online. We can talk about that later, the kind of work that can be done online that you don't have to come to the Kilby Center for.
Great. I thought it would be good, first of all, to talk in more detail about what we mean when we say addiction. You've just referred to the drugs and alcohol, and I think that's what would tend to spring to people's minds up front when they see the word addiction. But we use the word in a much, much wider context, and I thought, and obviously the facilitators will chip in with this. But Scott, what's your take on what addiction actually is?
Yeah, and I would like the facilitators to chip in. because I think everybody has some of them have experience with it personally and can put it into words. For me, it was something is reaching out for something repetitively or compulsively in order to cover up something that I don't want to feel, to run away from, cover up, medicate. And so when you say that broadly, it's much, much bigger than drugs and alcohol. It can be anything. Even spiritual seeking can be a form of addiction. So when I like to define it that broadly, and then just to leave it open to, there's a lot of stuff under that. Like, why is this uncomfortable experience happening? And a lot of times it's because of beliefs that we haven't investigated. And as we investigate those beliefs, those traumas, the stuff comes to the surface. And then, the beautiful thing though is when it starts to come to the surface and you start being open to feel what you haven't been willing to feel or open to feel, then it seems like gradually the addictions can start to wane. So, it works both ways. If I'm trying to cover up my experience because it's negative, I might tend to be addictive, but as I start to welcome my experience, the addiction falls away. So that's kind of how I like to define it, but I'd like to hear from others around that.
Lisa, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. I'll just share a couple of things that build on what Scott said, that for me, there were repeating patterns or behaviors that even though they were creating suffering in my life, I was still doing them. So honestly, that's pretty broad, but it's pretty true. The compulsion to repeat behaviors, even though that it was causing myself, my well-being, some kind of suffering, some kind of disconnect from what was true for me in a certain kind of way. So, yeah.
Melanie, do you want to chip in? What's your experience of addiction?
Definitely what's been said, and the flip side of the addictive tendencies that I've had, that, well, first of all, they're not just substances like my food addiction or activity addictions, but they're inner addictions, like addictive thought loops that I get caught up in and I can't get out of for who knows how long, or trying to rewrite what I said yesterday over and over in the head. So there's a lot of mental looping that's gone on, and what's been, so maybe that's where I'll stop instead of going beyond the addiction, is just to name a few.
Yeah, my experience as I think about this is partly looking at the different addictions: chocolate addiction, cigarettes, cannabis, screen addiction, some of the addictions that you've mentioned as well, Melanie. But what I'm also very aware of, and that's been the most interesting part of the discovery for me, is why I'm addicting. And yes, there's this desire to not feel how bad I feel, and something like chocolate will take me out and then crash me, and I'll go round that loop. But I found most interesting was this discovery of what I call the gap. It's like, and I discovered this with screen addiction. If I would go to bed and I wouldn't be able to just allow myself to sit in just the empty darkness, it would feel too scary. It would feel like I was falling. It would feel like I was unheld. And I would just put on Facebook and just screen surf for an hour or more to just feel like I was getting enough of a hit of stimulation to avoid that feeling of loneliness, emptiness, like I was a ghost or something.
Yeah, I think Scott mentioned something about wanting to escape. So there's this compulsive desire or urge to escape what is here without the escaping, right? So whether it's that isolation or aloneness or pain or whatnot, there's the wanting to move away from that in any way that we can through heightened sensation, pleasure, screen time. Sometimes it's causing pain, direct pain, to avoid other kinds of pain. So there's any kind of compulsivity as used as an escape, right, may simply be an addiction. We could call an addiction in some kind of way. Yeah. And I love that chocolate one too. That's certainly, I think we've had that conversation of just, it can be something very simple and even innocuous, but in our own self, we have a sense when we're doing something to escape and when we're not. And it's that kind of honesty that we connect with in this work that's so valuable, to say to oneself and to rest with what's going on, to say, is this coming from a wanting to escape some kind of discomfort that's here, or is it coming just from simplicity? You know, and only only one person, oneself can answer that, so to speak, through you know, some resting, some honesty, and looking.